am Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chairman of the board of LexMedia. I'm here today with Melanie Thompson, who is a lifelong resident, somebody I've known for a very, very long time. We worked together as co-chairs of the Lexington Democratic Town Committee. And I really enjoyed our time working together there. So it was a lot of fun. And I was so pleased to see you go from there then to the Democratic State Committee.
That's right.
And then deciding to run for the planning board 3 years ago. So you've taken, the call to serve very seriously.
Yes.
Melanie is running for a second term on the Lexington Planning Board. We were talking a little bit before the camera started rolling, about one of the reasons you decided to run before. I mean, there were a lot of concerns about the state of affairs at the planning board in the planning department. There were a lot of departures, comings and goings, it seems to me, and this is me saying this, not you, there seemed to be a lot of issues. Whenever there was an issue or a problem emanating from in-town government, a lot of it was emanating from the planning process, and I think that's, if I'm correct, that was part of the inspiration for you to decide to run, as I recall, 3 years ago, because you wanted to affect some change over there and make positive change. So let's talk a little bit about that. And it kind of goes into probably why you're running again. So, because the job needs to continue. So tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, thanks, Jim. And it's very nice to be here. This is really my first time being interviewed by you.
Okay.
So thank you for having me.
Of course.
Well, yes, I am running for re-election to the planning board. And as you said, my first term 3 years ago, there was a lot of back and forth on the planning board. We had several different planning directors on staff, and we had a couple of people leave on the planning board. And I thought that was a good time for me to try to run and get on the planning board. I've been in Lexington for most of my life.
You don't have to say how many years.
Thank you.
You look very youthful, so let's just leave it at that.
Okay, great. But I have been here for a long time, so I've seen lots of the changes that have gone on, and I know lots of people, and so I thought that's another reason why I wanted to run, and I did, and thankfully I did win. So I started in 2021.
Difficult time to start anything.
Well, yes, it was. COVID was, raging, and it was sort of a learning curve for everybody on how to communicate. Thankfully, we have a very smart town, and we have a lot of people who know how to engineer these things. So we mostly,
not the least of which is LexMedia. I mean, we were able to bring, without hesitation at all of these public meetings, these government meetings to the people throughout the pandemic,
right,
because government didn't stop.
That's right.
Right. So,
yeah.
But I understand what you're saying.
Right. So, I started then at that time, and I became clerk of the planning board in 2023. So, I have worked on many, many things, but in the beginning, when I was first starting on the planning board, you're learning about zoning and land use and how to be on the planning board. There's a lot, really. It's like
it's complicated.
It's drinking from a fire hose, really.
Right.
So I actually took lots of continuing education courses while I was getting up to speed in the beginning, and we do have some experienced people on the planning board. We got a very good new planning staff director, so that is really good. So I think all things kind of came together to sort of help me along in the beginning. So now that I have 3 years under my belt and many sort of experiences with the members and learning courses and developers and residents and staff and all sorts of things,
right,
I feel like I'm really ready for re-election.
Right, you've got more to offer.
A lot. And I find it's just very interesting. Yes, there's a lot to do. When you're on the planning board, I don't think you're most people's best friend, But
You've got to make some controversial decisions at times.
yes,
Right.
sometimes we do. But I always try to just listen to all sides. I'm really a collaborator when it comes to making decisions. And all of our meetings, they're all, we have sections of public meetings. So all kinds of members of the town, anyone can really come on, either if it's in person. We occasionally have in-person meetings now, which I don't mind at all.
Right.
I think it's good. And we have Zoom meetings, and people can just come in, listen, and give their points of view. And we listen to those points of view. We really do. It's not easy when there are lots of decisions to make about important matters. And we're part of this community too,
Right.
and we want everything, to work out for the best way of the town and its residents.
And the work of the planning board, I mean, people think about it, and I've been talking with some of the other folks who are running, about some of the big picture issues. But it's macro and micro. So when you're talking about the larger, the village overlays, the MBTA village overlays, but you also have to deal with individual requests from homeowners.
True.
And that's more on a micro level, individual homeowners, and when they want to make certain modifications to their property, there's a requirement for them to come in front of the planning board.
True.
So it's not always just the big picture stuff.
No, it's not. It's some big things like Hartwell Ave upzoning. That was a big thing. But we also have smaller things. Street. Some people want to have their streets become part of the town.
All right, accepted roads.
Yes, that's right. So we listen to them doing that, or some other type of special permitted type of thing. So we listen to those as well as big things,
Right.
commercial things as well as residential things. Anything to do with land use,
Right.
typically it comes before the planning board.
So you mentioned commercial, I often, like the new building that's going up on Bedford Street, the really, really big one where the hotel used to be. That must have come before the planning board, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But that came, I think that was either 2017 or 2019.
So before you were
I got
on
there.
the board.
But I did vote in 2019 as a town meeting member. I remember that was up for a vote. But the whole discussion of that 440 Bedford Street is what you're talking
440
about.
Bedford Street.
Yeah.
Because it cuts both ways. People, I've heard arguments that it's just too big. I think it's a lovely looking building. I think we need that in Lexington. People, where else? There are very, very few places to put that kind of a building. But the stress it's going to put on traffic and that stretch of road is the big concern for most people. So, I understand that you weren't part of that decision-making process, but I assume you take those kinds of things into consideration, like the impacts of traffic.
Oh,
and other
absolutely.
things, when you have these discussions.
Traffic studies, landscape studies, all kind. Everything
Right.
is reviewed, and there are separate groups of people who do these types
Right.
of things and then bring that study to the planning board.
Right.
So there are many, many studies. That 440 Bedford Street, that's going to bring a tremendous amount of commercial revenue to,
Right.
tax revenue to the town, which is something that we need because the commercial tax revenue is a lot higher than residential. And
Right.
as you
We've
know,
got a split tax base, right?
that's right. So as you know, there's new school that they're talking about. I mean, that's going to cost a lot of money.
Right.
So if we can get some commercial tax revenue,
Right.
that would be great.
People are always saying we need to do that, and as I mentioned before, we have very little opportunity. I know along Hartwell Avenue, there's been a discussion going on for a very long time, and I know several years ago, I was just getting active with the Chamber of Commerce. I want to say this was well over 10 years ago. They were talking about changing the FAR, the floor area ratio, and the setbacks along Hartwell Avenue. But at that time, there wasn't any real buy-in from the landlords.
Yeah.
And nothing ever really came of it. And now I know we more recently had sort of addressed that again. And I was actually at a meeting of the landlords, of the building owners, the property owners.
Yeah.
And the Secretary Keneally was in the room,
Yeah.
and he asked for a show of hands. How many of you owners would be receptive to this, and everybody raised their hands. So at that moment, I felt like there was real buy-in. So because you do need the cooperation, you can change the policy all you want, but if there's no cooperation with property owners,
That's true.
it's moot.
And when you think of how it looks, it's a lot of 1980s type buildings,
Right.
and not in today's commercial environment where you have life science type companies and medical companies. That's not the type of building that they want to move into.
Right.
So we have to sort of weigh that. If you have the land, the property owners, ready to make a change, and we have types of companies that want to be over there,
Right.
changes have to be made in our zoning to affect that.
And we have attracted a lot of life science companies
Yes,
here
we
through
have.
Lexington along Hayden Ave. I mean, not the least of which is, Takeda,
Yes.
which used to be Shire. For those who are unaware, they changed several years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the village overlay, and I've talked about this with some other folks. The village, your perspective on the village overlays. We have 5 village overlays, so it's not the entire community. It does include the center business district. Do you think that's meeting the objective? I know it's a mandate from the state, and Lexington was quick to get on board with it. They went far beyond the requirement. I think the requirement was 80 acres or something. I think it was 80 acres, but we're up. I heard over 200 acres that
Yes,
are in
we
the
are.
village
But that
overlays.
is only 2% of the available land in Lexington. So
Okay.
98% of the land is going to have nothing to do with the MBTA communities.
Well, that's a good point, because I didn't know it was that small. Because when you think about
That's
200
right.
acres, that sounds like a lot of
It
land.
sounds like a lot. Numbers sound like a lot. But so that, yes, you're right. That was a mandate by the state. And we spent, I can't tell you how many hours and days, and I think it was over a year that we spent analyzing. And we had over 24 public meetings about the MBTA community process. We had a very big meeting that over 100 residents attended at the community center, with maps all over the room for people to think or choose where they might like to see.
And have input.
That's right. Yes, we had Lexington, the email, Lexington, I think it was Sean at the time. I'm not sure who the person is now, but we did that. We sent things to TMMA. So we communicated extensively on the MBTA communities. So we ended up, and each time we had a public meeting, we were talking about another area. So there will be 12 village overlays, and we kind of chose areas that already might have had some commercial on their first level. Say, for example, along Mass Ave in East Lexington. That would be a wonderful place to have multifamily homes along with maybe mixed use.
Plus, it's on the MBTA route.
It's on the MBTA route. So we chose areas like that along Merritt Road in that corner there, that has the 2 gas stations and a couple of...
Merritt Square.
Yes,
right.
that area. We
Right.
chose that.
That's the intersection of Waltham and
Yes,
Merritt, right?
right. So we really put a lot of thought
Right.
and effort into where these village overlays would be.
Right. Let me ask you a question, though.
Yeah.
East Lexington, and I understand it's on the MBTA route, but East Lexington, and my office is there. I grew up on we both kind of grew up on the other side of the tracks, if you will. I grew up a little bit east of Maple Street. You guys were just on the other side of Maple Street growing up, and I remember, but East Lexington always seems to bear the brunt of these situations, where they have. If you go to East Lexington, you go up into the neighborhoods, the homes are closer together,
Yes.
they're smaller, they're more affordable. So, and I don't mean to say that in a bad way. I mean, because it's really very charming.
This is going to be, I think,
Right.
wonderful for East Lexington.
Right.
East Lexington has not had any redevelopment in how many years?
Right.
It hasn't been. So this is not going to be within,
Right.
the neighborhood areas. It's just going to be along Mass Ave.
Right.
And just think how wonderful it would look to have maybe a couple coffee shops or, I don't know, dentist's office or, whatever
Right.
small retail on the bottom, and then have
Making it a true
multifamily.
village.
Absolutely. I think, it's all on how things get designed, get developed, and that's what we want to do. That's one of the reasons why I really would like to get reelected, because we spent so much time on getting this done. I really would love to be a part of seeing it come to fruition. The MBTA communities, it does not require anything be built at all. It just requires the overlay zoning be put into place.
Right.
So that's what we did. We put that zoning into place. So now the next step is to see what developers might come along that, would follow along with the requirements, which is another thing that we did. We spent weeks adding all new requirements to that so that people would follow along, and it would look like something that Lexington would want. So I really think that it would be great to be able to work the process, to see what the designs look like, see what the landscaping, how's the traffic going to work.
Right.
I think it would be great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I was one of the folks that was I came to the table late on the whole changing of in East Lexington, taking the Wilson Farm Circle out and putting the light in. I thought it was going to be a disaster in Maple Street. It worked.
Wonderfully.
What I've learned is, don't be so close-minded.
Yeah.
I've learned that it really has worked, because I travel that area a lot.
Yeah.
And I see traffic moving. So what I've learned is to be a little bit more open-minded about change.
Yes,
in
I know
Lexington.
it's scary. I understand so much about change and how people are afraid of it, but sometimes it helps to trust a little bit, and the process is open
Right.
to everyone,
Right.
and
anything we can do to make more available housing.
we need housing.
And we need to keep it as affordable as possible, as affordable as you possibly can in Lexington.
Yes, right. Affordability in Lexington is a different number than what it is, say, further,
Right.
Out west or something. It's
Right.
different, but.
And we're not alone in that.
No, there are many communities.
Housing all over Greater Boston.
Exactly. It's high. We live in a high-cost area with no land.
Right.
Right. The only land that we get is if something that is already there.
Right.
Right. So
That's why we've got so many tear downs, because
Yes.
we have such limited, which is funny because it's so diametric, or maybe that's not the right word, but we were a farming community back in the founding of Lexington, and we had great acreage. Now, but of course that was a different time.
Yeah, now it's built. But we still have a lot of conservation land, and we have wetlands, and
Right.
those, things are going to remain. There, we have nothing where none of the MBTA communities have anything to do
Right.
with that. So I think it would be great to see the first one or two
Right.
come along and see how it works out.
You're right, and you make a good point about the need to do this, and going back to how much land it really does. I was going to say that there's no requirement to actually build.
That's right.
We just have to be in a position to be able to
Just
and
change the zoning.
change the zoning so that it can happen.
That's right.
Right, on its own. There is a little, I'll ask you this, there's a little bit of controversy going on in the center of town. One landlord has already notified a tenant that they're only extending a lease for a very, very limited amount of time. Not months, a couple of years, but with the idea that they want to be able to be in a position to build in residential units with obviously the commercial
Yes.
underneath. So that's starting. I mean, the conversation is starting. You're going to begin to see a lot of that on the Mavens and all of this because the one of the businesses that is affected is a business that's been in Lexington for a very long time.
Oh.
And so but it's by right, and this.
Well, one thing to remember
Yeah.
for downtown Lexington is it's not part of the MBTA, the Article 3A. It's not part of that. But the reason is because it would have people wanted to have only 4 stories.
Right.
So that did not come under the MBTA
That came up through the
requirement.
special
Right.
group.
And the Lexington Center committee was firm about having retail on the first floor,
Right.
which was also not. So they can do that now,
Right.
and they can have up to 4 stories.
And that's under the SRD?
Yeah,
not
that's right.
Not the village overlay?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
All right.
So I think that would be wonderful.
Well, it will be in the long
that.
run. And again, it's been a long time since Lexington has undergone any major, with the exception of the new condominiums where the Battle Green Inn was.
That was
we
a
haven't,
long
I
time
look
ago.
at pictures, I know, and I look at the pictures of just, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it was different. And we haven't had any major changes in several decades.
Yeah.
So it can be welcoming. My big concern is displacement of businesses during that construction period.
Yes.
And you're going to hear a lot more about that coming up. But, I'm hoping that, people will sort of come together to make sure that these businesses that have chosen to be in Lexington and invested in our community are treated with respect and understanding, and that we make it easy for them. And if they need to be displaced for a period of time and then offered the opportunity to come back to those spaces, that there is support for them.
I agree with you. And that's something that we don't want to lose. We talked
Right.
about this, is our commercial tax base.
Right.
Because, as I said before, it's higher than residential, and the town needs that
Right.
revenue.
So we only have another minute or so.
Okay.
I apologize. I've been apologizing to everybody because normally we would have a full 30 minutes, but we have, 9 candidates
Yes.
seeking townwide office, which
Very
is a
unusual.
good thing. It is
Yeah.
unusual, but it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And even as an incumbent, I think you would agree that, I always think when you're running, you always run a little faster when you're in a foot race with another
Yes,
person.
this is true.
Right. And I think having challenges sort of brings out the best. It allows you to get the opportunity to get out there and remind the community about why it is that you're serving and why you're so passionate about it.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk, if there's anything that we didn't cover that you want to mention, or if you want to talk about your background or what have you, and then after that, we're going to ask you to give your website so people can learn about you. Is there
Okay.
anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to mention?
Well, there's probably lots,
Right.
There's things coming up all the time,
Right.
right? And sometimes, people, reach out to me sometimes via email, all of us on the board, about one development or other. But it's just that it's a desirable community. It's very close to Cambridge and Boston, where all of the life science, buildings are, and those companies want nice communities for their employees to live.
Right.
So it's just sort of straight up Mass Ave, and we're like one of the big communities that they want. So sometimes there are smaller site-sensitive developments that come up, and people see, all these trees being removed.
Right.
It's along the setback is where we have jurisdiction. There's nobody that has any say about trees on somebody's property.
Right.
It's just a setback. So we hear from that a lot.
Right.
There are other places that developers that are frequent builders in town.
Right.
They build, and some things are by right, which we don't.
You have no control over.
Right, no, we don't. And others are now site sensitive, which is better, I think, than special permit, because we can talk about, certain things like traffic and landscaping and, trying to keep a certain look about a house,
Right.
not just have a 6,000 square foot house,
Right.
trying to get an affordable in the development, maybe one, maybe
Right.
two. So I think it's good that we have these planning
Right.
board meetings. And I think it's great that people come to the public meetings to talk about it.
Great. Well, we have to close out. I really, having known you most of my entire life, I enjoyed talking with you. I always have, and
Me
I've enjoyed
too.
working with you in the
Yeah.
past on other projects. You have a certain perspective that you bring, having been nearly a lifelong resident here and
Right.
growing up here and having gone to schools. So you've seen all the changes.
Yes.
So if folks want to learn more about you, they go to your website. And what is that?
Yes, please. My website has got lots of information on it. It's melaniethompson.org. That's easy to remember.
That's very simple.
melaniethompson.org.
Okay.
And there's information about who I am, what the things that I think are important for Lexington, information about our comprehensive plan. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that. Other organizations that I've worked with in town. Also ways to if you would like to, host a lawn sign for me or volunteer for my campaign in any kind of way, make a donation, those kinds of things. They're all there.
Good. Well, I wish you all the best. I know that you've enjoyed your time on the board, and obviously you've put a lot into it with the sort of getting up to speed, the learning,
Yeah.
being proactive. So I think that'll all work very well for you. So
Thank
I
you.
wish you all the best, and it's always good to see you.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much that you made it easy. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melanie.